Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Nancy Drew. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously, we're picking up with Nancy and Gil having captured Everett, and now they're holding him because they want to confront him about Celia's murder, which the moment he was like, Celia's dead, I was like, now either he's just that good at lying, or it's like, he doesn't know about Celia's death, which surprised me. Because, and it comes up later on, he admits, like, oh, I didn't know you were my granddaughter till you said something. I brought that up last episode, like, his expression when she was like, yeah, you're the person that's going to catch you by surprise. Or, I'm paraphrasing, but she's like, yeah, the person you should be looking out for is me, your granddaughter. The look on his face is like, wait, what? The first time he learned that information. But my thought was maybe Celia had kept some other information from him and he killed her because of that. Once again, showed you just how much of a sociopath he is. The fact is he was just walking all about acting like everything's okay when he murdered his wife, or at least had her murdered. But it's like, oh no, he had nothing to do with it. So Nancy's trying to dig up anything she can to prove that he did it. Gil's going along with this because for Gil, it's like, right, Nancy promised to protect his dad. It's like, I mean, to be fair, your dad kind of put himself in Everett's cross. Well, because Everett doesn't know that it was Gil's dad that told Howard about the Black Crown tape. So I guess it's kind of fine. Because I'm about to say, like, he's the one that told Howard, and Howard is dead. So that could easily lead back to him. But he still hasn't tied the whole connection to Gil and Amanda's dad. So it's a situation where Everett is doing his thing, doing the evil, rich guy thing that he's doing. It's like, oh, I can pay. Like, the fact of the matter is, I don't want your dad dead. I just want him quiet. Fact of the matter is, I can make your dad happy by taking care of you two. So, like, I could get you guys out of that trailer park, give you enough money to kind of start your lives. Your happiness will keep him quiet. But it's also like, yeah, but Everett, that's the thing. Like, you will always have that leverage over him to a certain extent. And he says it later on, all about leverage. It's like, because even Nancy's like, you really think he's just going to pay you the money? It's like, no. I personally believe he would have, given the opportunity, he'll set it up to be like, oh yeah, you're going to get the money. And then he'll kill you because, like, oh, you went against me? No. You thought I was going to let this go? I was going to be okay with it? It's like, no, screw that. You're done. So I could definitely have seen things kind of going that route if they kind of went that far. Obviously, Ryan, visiting Celia's body, finding out, like, right, he immediately jumps because, like, if anyone's going to kill my mom, it's going to be my dad. So, because I was trying to remember how Ryan said he found out about where they were, because the place they are in is Lucy's place, because Nancy wanted to take him to a place that he would know all too well, like, did a place of one of his victims, one of his many victims. And so Ryan knew, like, the part of town where Everett was last kind of heard of being, like, the limo he was in was at. It's kind of like, okay, so Ryan knew the only connection that would be on that side of town would be Lucy. So he figured, like, he probably knew that Nancy was behind this maybe, so he figured this would probably lead to that. So I thought that was kind of an interesting development. Hell, when Ryan came in, just as Gil was kind of letting him go, Ryan, like, punched him. Because at first, like, Nancy was looking through some dirt. I thought she was going to find some stuff. Like, she looked up Celia. I thought she was going to find out, like, Everett never put out the hits. It was always Celia, so everything's in her name. That's what I was wondering, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. I mean, it still could be. I mean, hell, he's got Ryan's name on all the stuff that was kind of like his business, just so that if anything ever happened to him, Ryan would take the fall instead of him. So would it be too surprising if, like, he set Celia up to be, like, either legitimately saying, like, your name should be on all of this, or he just did it without letting her know? Also another possibility. So it's actually interesting too, because Nancy even confronted him about, like, the fact is your wife was murdered and, like, you just seem, like, nonchalant about it. He's like, well, I'm learning to control my emotions. The fact is you're feeling enough for both of us. And Everett, being who he is, he just picks. He knows just what points to strike, especially with Nancy, because for him it's like, oh, so you got to know Celia? And she's like, yes. It's like, oh, how? Is it because did you emotionally manipulate her because you are Ryan's daughter? And the fact is, Ryan and Celia weren't on the best of terms, but at least with Nancy, it's like, I get close to Ryan without, having, because for her, it's like, her and Ryan's relationship will ever be strained, like, they have too much history together. Nancy's kind of a blank slate. Yeah, like, Celia's still, like, what would be the word, corrupt in certain regards. Nancy kind of knows that firsthand, just like the way she kind of handles herself, but she doesn't have like the experience Ryan does with Celia, so it was a little bit more of a fresh start. I mean, even Nancy, when Celia didn't have her memories and stuff like that, Nancy was like, oh my god, she's actually a pretty dope grandma. Like, the way she is, like, this is the person I would want to be my grandmother instead of the typical Celia. So that, you know, it's sad because Everett's trying to make it seem like, oh, basically your mother issues are what led to this, because your biological mom killing herself and giving you away to your adopted parents, and your adopted mom dying from cancer, which Nancy was immediately like, shut your damn mouth, don't say their names. So once again, he likes to poke and prod at people's weaknesses. He likes to take advantage because he's kind of a shark, always sniffing for blood and in water. But I think more so it was on Celia's side of things. Like, granted, I think Celia, you know, I don't think it was even Nancy kind of going above and beyond. I think it was like Celia actually, like, maybe like some form of humanity, like spending so much time in the Hudson family, and like she lost her humanity a bit, but maybe it kind of finally came back to her spending time with Nancy, and maybe she thought like, oh, like I actually have a granddaughter. I'm kind of happy about that. You know, it's like, right, they had to worry about the Everett thing, but for her, it was like she was trying to protect Nancy. She did care about Nancy. I mean, to be fair, they had to make a deal and everything to get that point in the relationship, but eventually it comes out, like, actually looking into it, Everett and Celia have a prenup that if he ever murdered her, which in its, well, not just her, like, not just like him murdering her, her being murdered in general, makes it so that he would never get any money, which I'm assuming Celia knew what kind of person she was dealing with, so she had that set up ahead of time, which is so fascinating. Or maybe her family knew what kind of man Everett was and set that up ahead of time. Because that is something, we focus on the Hudson side of the family, but we've not touched anything on Celia's side of things. Like, I wonder, is that something we could see, but like, now that she's gone, like, will that kind of raise up? Because it's like, right, that's the thing, she's struggling with like the Drew side of herself, growing up a Drew, but also being a Hudson. It's like, what about Celia's family? Like, that might come with its own complications as well, because you're part that too. So, I mean, because I don't know if that's really come up in conversation. Like I said, most things we've kind of dealt with so far have always been Hudson related. So, but yeah, like that's a wild prenup to kind of have out there. I mean, because I know like some life insurances are like, yeah, if someone like kills themselves, it null and voids like the life insurance, so like the family can't get anything from it if they end up being the ones who will receive it. So, but now it's kind of, because even then it's like, but why would he? Because if he was going to murder Celia, why make it actually look like a murder? If he wanted to get rid of her for whatever reason, he would make it look like a suicide, like Howard. So it's like less and less reason why. And even Everett's like, yeah, because there's no proof that I did it, and now you're starting to believe I didn't. So now Gil's kind of feeling like they're screwed because Nancy set them up on this whole path of like, right, getting Everett out of the picture, but now you don't even have the evidence to say that he killed Celia, because apparently he didn't, and now everything, like, that was kind of like your smoking gun, and now that's kind of down the drain. What do we have? We kidnapped him. Like, what are we going to do now? We're all kind of screwed, because now it's like, my dad, you promised to protect him and everything. But then they start talking through it a little bit about Celia, because then they start thinking like, what kind of enemies would Celia have? And then it's kind of like, it's like, oh, she was all about parties and stuff like that. But it's also like, well, to be fair, like, there were plenty of people who hated Celia. And it's like, sorry, he was apologizing, no offense. And Ryan's like, no offense, it's true. Like, like a lot of people have problems with their family. And, and then they start piecing things together. The way she was pinned up, it's like, right, it was like an Icarus. And then Nancy, which we learned 2 episodes back, that Icarus, it's 2 of its surviving members went off and formed what is the road back. And it's like, dude. So that's where this all comes into place. Celia started digging and they killed her. Her death put in that shape. Even like one of the things Tamora found on her body and gave to Ryan was like a coin that had the symbol on it, their symbol. So yeah, and Everett pointing at her being like, yeah, the one that got your grandmother brutally murdered was you. The rollback brutally murdered her to send you a message. And now because Nancy's already struggled with feeling responsible for dragging so many people into things. Like all of her friends, she got them dragged into all this supernatural stuff and investigations, and that ultimately led to the whole Aglika situations. Well, which eventually turned into the whole Odette situation, which they're still kind of dealing with that with like George being possessed. Which still the only person who knows is Ace. Bess has some idea like there's something up because Aunt May said something to her, but like that's about it. So Ace and George are the only ones who know the truth about that circumstance, but still. So, but it's the guilt of like constantly getting people involved and stuff, and now it's like, right, I'm the reason why my grandmother is dead, but Ryan doesn't blame her. It's like, no, my mom died because, it's like, but she was doing me a favor. It's like, yeah, a favor? No. Everything my mom did was a business transaction. What you were doing was trying to save Ace's life, and for her, it's like she made a business transaction. She decided to dig up that information for you. My mom knew what kind of people the road back were, and she made that choice. Like, her choices led to that, so don't carry that guilt, And now it's like, well, what do we do? It's like, we bust Everett you got him tied up for the wrong murder, So, because it's like, let's not get it twisted. You and I know better than anyone what kind of person my dad is. He's not a good person. He might not have killed Celia, but he's killed other people, so. And at the same time, Gil and him had that whole conversation about leverage and stuff, and he's just kind of like, basically like, let me go. And Nancy comes back in, and obviously it's a whole conversation about, what, I guess we have to go with plan C. It's like, what's plan C? We're gonna have to kill Everett. Wait, what? And then obviously Ryan is like, no, I don't want you to go down this path. It's like, I'm saying, getting justice, sure, but not killing him. And then we have Gil letting him go. I'm like, really, Gil? Come on, you can't trust this bastard. Turns out the whole thing was planned. I was like, yes, double yes. Well, we have like, which, side note, I skipped over quite a bit because there's other interesting aspects to this. Tamura being really good at what he does. The fact is that he immediately, here's these headlights, and he got Nick. It's like, yo, do you know? Nick's like, yeah, those are. And then he realized where the headlights come from because he is a car dude, and he changed his tune and was kind of like, yeah. And Tamura immediately wrote in his Nancy Drew's headlights or whatever. Tail lights or whatever. So it's like, yeah, he knew like, the only reason why Nick would ever get that cage, he must have had some idea, and then he just had Nick confirm it. Nick's reaction confirmed it, or just Nick's reaction in general was like, right, you'd only change your tune like that, but protecting someone, and who's the one person you protect above all else? Nancy. So even when later on he was calling Ryan about, have you seen Nancy and stuff, like, he's like, haven't seen her. Yeah, hey Nancy. So it's like he knew that, and it's like, yeah, put Everett on the phone, and it's like, it's like Tamura really easily figured them out. He's, once again, showing you, like, hey, he's really good at his job. So there's that element to it. I didn't really talk about it, too, but also, like, Carson, Bess, Hannah, and George are kind of working with trying to help find Nancy, along with Ace, but also like there's a whole other thing they're working on too, which we'll circle back to that soon enough. But I love the whole situation where it turns out immediately after it was all said and done, you had when he got released, Everett went running and looking for the tape. And it's like, fell right into their trap because they had mentioned it earlier about the Black Crown tape and everything. So they purposely threw it out there to let him know we know about it. So, and he revealed it to him. And so Tamura's there, and it's like, that's a he said, she said situation. So, but that movie, I'm really interested in watching it. And the moment they start watching it, and it's like, oh yeah, that's my Uncle Josiah, I was like, and there we go. I figured it had to be because, once again, what Ryan said, when my dad sees red, he kind of can't control himself. So I figured as much. I was like, especially with this Black Crown tape, especially learning like, he only got the business because Uncle Josiah died. It's like, okay, yep. He had to be responsible. I mean, granted, any victim could have been the reason why this tape was coming back, but it had to be someone, like, it could have just been any number of people. I figured it wasn't, like, any specific, like, ghost, like, from anyone else he killed before. Like, I figured whoever it was had to be the ghost of the person who who he killed. I guess I knew like he killed Josiah, but I guess I didn't correlate and think. At least I don't think I did. I don't remember everything I said last time, but I didn't correlate 100% that the tape would be about him killing Josiah. Did we ever find out who the hell filmed that? Did Josiah set that up ahead of time, or like what? I don't know. I don't remember them saying like who filmed that. Maybe I think they talked about it like last episode, but I'm just not remembering off the top of my head. But and even Ryan being like, yeah, why did he kill Josiah? Most likely for money and power. Like, my dad's never been big into sharing, you know? So, and obviously that's frustrating for Ryan, because it's like, you told us like Uncle Josiah died of like, went missing in the woods and just died from alcoholism, and it's like, nope, you straight up murdered your own brother. Which I guess that could also be another reason for the tape, because it's like, oh, you know, it could also be like, right, it's supposed to be the greatest sin, you know, some like very like Cain and Abel type of biblical type of stuff, that maybe that's why there's such a powerful thing to it. Probably also, you know, them being brothers, it makes that hatred and spiritual energy tied to it probably that much stronger, is why, like, no matter what. I mean, I think it's also poetic, because it's like, right, your greatest sin, no matter what you did, you couldn't escape it, you know? Especially consider you benefited and grew so much of your life from that sin. So, at the end of the day, Everett is arrested for it. But then, like, she was asking, so what did Everett say to you when Tamura was like, what did he whisper to you when Tamura was pulling him away? It's like, welcome to the family, you know, and he's kind of smiling, and he's like, I wasn't going to tell, like, oh, Everett's smiling, but Ryan's like, I wasn't going to tell you that. She's like, no, I need to kind of come to terms with who I am, you know. I need to stop hiding who I am. I am a Hudson. But I think it's also because, like, for Everett, it's like, welcome to the family, because, well, look at this. This is kind of how the Hudsons do business. This is how we operate. How how backstabby we can be. But also, like, the fact that she went above and beyond, did what she did, kidnap him and everything. It's like, oh, you're definitely a Hudson and stuff like that, doing what you did. So I think that's what that's supposed to represent. So there's that angle to the episode. Kind of let's pivot a little bit before we circle back to the rest of everything else. But let's start off with the whole situation with, obviously, mainly this episode, Nick is working on, building up that youth center and everything, which I love. But he has a complaint from Jake, who owns a cafe. It's like, oh, maybe he's worried that, like, there's going to be too much noise and it's going to devalue the place, blah, blah, blah. So he goes out to Jake. It's like, okay, this is a good thing. We'll keep the demolition down to, like, the demolition and stuff like that to him. And he's like, yeah, I mean, that's great and everything, but no. It's like, what? It's like, yeah, what do we know about these kids? It's like, well, you trust me? It's like, yeah, I mean, I do trust you. You're one of the good ones. And it's like, what? I mean, that could be taken multiple ways, but it's also like, because, you know, for Nick, it's like, yeah, I was one of those kids, and look where I am. I'm a successful business owner and everything, and I'm just trying to give back. But Jake is still very like, nah, I'm kind of, you know, it's like, you could do all that you want to, but I'm not going to change my mind. Eventually, I started wondering, it's like, are you just a terrible person? Are you a racist? And I was like, no, because we don't know the race of the at-risk kids. Statistically, the sad thing is, statistically, you can be like, yeah, there's statistics that suggest who they might be. But it's also like, right, you're not willing to give these kids a chance. Like, that's kind of scummy. But I was also wondering, was there like a monetary reason? Like, maybe there was something else at play here, the reason why. But talking to Tamura, Nick kind of confronts him, and I love Nick just putting his leg up on the chair, almost like a captain, being like, yeah, like, before, ignorant people like you were just kind of D-bags like you, I would have just kind of submitted, kind of like gone above and beyond to try and plead you and work with you like I was earlier, but it's like, nah, I'm not going to do that. And Nick goes in super petty mode. It's like, you see that place across the street? Yeah, I just bought that because I'm rich. I'm really rich, Jake. And the fact is, I bought it and it doesn't fit within that 50 feet. So you can't say anything about us building or demolishing or do whatever. Like, you have no say over that anymore. But he's like, I'm just trying to, because for him, it's like, this place is good and traditional, and I'm trying to keep it that way. It's like, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. Which, once again, that word traditional, there can be quotes around, like, what that means, but I love Nick telling him, because for him, it's like, why is this so, like, why couldn't you just take it to another point in town? Like, it's like, because for him, he kept being like, I'll even give you money to build up this youth center, just make sure it's not in this town. I'm like, why do you have to be such a D-bag about it? But Nick, I love that statement for him of like, why? It's because these kids need to feel like there's a place for them to belong in their own community. You know, if you're sending them somewhere else, it's like, wait, there's not a place for me even in my own home, you know? And even Nick being like, oh yeah, also like the competing cafe across the street, that's going to be a huge deal. So good luck, Jake. And he kind of walks away and I'm like, yeah. Petty, double middle fingers, got you, Jake. You suck as a human being. But I thought that was, you know, really not, because it's like for, you know, Nick got a second chance because Tiffany gave him one and he just wanted to kind of pay that forward, that these kids deserved, you know, a second chance, you know, a place to feel like they belong, a place to change, to kind of pave their own future, pave the way towards their own future, you know? So I thought that was a really interesting side of things, but also circling back to the other, like I brought up earlier, main side of things is, you know, obviously you have Carson getting his like crash course on the supernatural because he shows Bess initially the picture of Nancy. It's like, what does this mean? You see stuff like this all the time. Like, sadly we do. So the rest of the crew is gathered trying to look into this, and it turns out Nancy has like some kind of curse on her, which just also prompts George to be like, yeah, kind of not just talk about Nancy's situation. What about, I have a friend, yeah, that's possessed by a spirit, told that they're, you know, blood, like they're, because that person, that spirit's life was so brutal, like, brutal and violent, that, short and violent, that it's going to have an effect on this person's life. And it's like, well, when did this person die? When they were 22? It's like, well, basically saying that it averages out and kind of leans to more towards the spirit. So saying like, your friend probably has maybe less than a decade. It's like, yo, I was kind of thinking she was going to say like, oh, basically an average of where their age is. So like George is 18, Odette was like 22. Side note, something I realized, and I feel so stupid, she's not in the episode, so I wanted to wait until an episode for her to pop up to say it, but I didn't realize the actress who plays Odette is also the actress who plays Scarlet in Big Sky. Totally didn't realize that. I kept looking at her in Big Sky being like, why does she seem so familiar? It just didn't correlate until I was looking at her IMDb and I was like, oh, because I saw it like, oh, this actress, who's she playing Nancy Drew? I was like, I'm stupid, she's Odette. Regardless, tangents aside, like I came across that like maybe a day or two ago, so that was kind of in my mind. Nevertheless, so, but I thought it was going to average out to like, right, so the, 4 years different in age, I thought that's what it was. I mean, it could still represent that, because she said less than a decade. 4 years is less than a decade, but that's what I was thinking, like, yeah. Which is interesting timing. Well, not necessarily interesting timing, but it's like, yeah, the passengers on Manifest are kind of in a year situation like that themselves. But ultimately, they end up finding out, like, what's going on with Nancy is she has a parasite. And it's basically draining her life away, and that basically at this point she's only gonna have a couple days. But Carson's like, no, a parasite can be removed. I'm not gonna let this be the end. But especially George being like, no, because it's like all the previous people who've had a parasite similar to this died, so there has been no means of removing it. At least no one's been successful. But I mean, they've done the impossible before. They dealt with the Aglaika. Granted, there were ramifications for that, but hey, they dealt with the Aglaika, which no one has been able to do. Like, no one survived the Aglaika. Well, there was one, but that all kind of came to an end, you know, in its own right. But because Home Dude ended up ultimately dying because of everything, but. So they've kind of done the impossible before, and especially George being like, yeah, we're not going to let these entities possessing our bodies, like, you know, dictate, like, kind of like kill us, you know. George is speaking not only for Nancy but herself. But basically they got some special cameras made and designed, you know, Nick helped to basically try and get a good photo of this thing. And so Carson leads, you know, Nancy back to the place and says, like, I got to show you something. And in that moment, they took a whole bunch of photos of Nancy's shoulder. It's the Wraith. I was like, that's so cool to make, especially considering we're at the end of the season, for that to come full circle in certain regards. Once again, what was originally going to be the season finale, I'm assuming was, you know, when they dealt with the Aglaika and, you know, George got brought back and everything. Like, I think that was originally supposed to be the season finale. Once again, I think the original season was going to be like, because that was like episode 4 or 5, so it would have been like 22, 23 episodes, something like that. And so for like the thing that pops up in the first episode, which I still believe would have been episode 1 of season 2. So with that, and also like, you know, at the very least, you can phrase it, even if you just want to use it as season 2, the first new arc of the season, that that was the first thing, and for it to be like, oh, this thing's been with you the entire time. You thought you killed it, but it's been latched onto you the entire time. And it's like, but how could I not notice? I would have noticed, right? And it's like, well, you just said it yourself, Nancy. You felt like you don't know who you are anymore. And it's like, could this be the reason why? And we flash back to like a lot of like decisions and just kind of like Nancy not being herself with just how she's handled a lot of stuff. It was this Rafe kind of like shutting her up or stopping her or shifting her, like pushing her in certain directions. You're like, holy crap, it's been there the entire time. Subtle, but when you add up everything they showed you, I love that. Once again, just everything literally coming full circle in that regard. And for Nancy, it's like, parasites killed their host. How much time do I have left? Because the reason why they also had to like surprise her was like, we couldn't let this, because this thing is going over here, so we can't let it know we're aware of it. Now it knows that they're aware of it, so it's probably going to do everything it can to stop them. So that's going to be like, I think, the main crux of what we're going to deal with in the next episode, which is going to be the season finale. So I'm sure we're not going to touch on the road back stuff, but we could at least start tiptoeing towards that, or at the very least, maybe this whole Rafe thing isn't concluded until, you know, maybe the road back is just the conclusion of the season. You know, maybe something kind of gets sparked with that, or maybe like I said, maybe this Rafe thing doesn't kind of very much how, like, once again, it was done specifically because, like, right, well, I was about to say, like, the Aglaika thing didn't get resolved, but that's also because, like, well, the first season got cut short. A lot of seasons this season are getting cut short, so I don't know whether they went into this knowing they had this many episodes, so, you know, who knows how they planned out a lot of stuff. But regardless, like I said, next week's episode is the season finale. I am so interested to see ultimately how they end up wrapping up the season. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.